Montana covers 147,040 square miles, larger than the entire nation of Japan, and holds barely over 1 million people. Most of what happens inside that space is invisible to the rest of the country. Over the next 50 facts, you'll find weather records that sound like typing errors, a lake with more shoreline than California, a toxic pit guarded around the clock by lasers, and an ice age event that still stands as the largest flood ever documented on Earth. Today, we're counting down 50 Montana facts that will reshape how you see the fourth largest state. This channel covers geography and natural science every week. If that's your kind of thing, subscribe so you don't miss the next countdown. Let's start with Fact 50. Fact 50. The inland sea of fresh water. In the northwest corner of the state, Flathead Lake spreads across roughly 197 square miles, the largest natural freshwater lake west of the Mississippi in the lower 48. It's a leftover of Ice Age glaciation, and it's large enough to soften the local climate. The proof grows on its shores, sweet cherry orchards, ripening every summer in northern Montana. Fact 49. Gatekeeper of the world's first national park. Yellowstone is Wyoming's park on the map. In practice, 3 of its 5 entrance gates sit in Montana, including the original north entrance at Gardner, beneath the stone Roosevelt Arch, the only gate open to cars year-round. The world's first national park was established on the 1st of March 1872. Most of its visitors enter, eat, and sleep in Montana. Fact 48. Outnumbered by cattle, 2 to 1. That is roughly the ratio of cattle to people in Montana, about 2 million cattle against 1.1 million humans. In parts of the east, some counties count dozens of cattle per resident. You can drive an hour on an eastern highway, pass hundreds of animals, and never see a person. Fact 47. The breadbasket nobody pictures. The name Montana means mountain, but roughly the eastern 3/5 of the state is Great Plains. That prairie makes Montana a top 3 wheat producer and the nation's number 2 barley grower, with an average elevation of 3,400 feet, the lowest of all 8 mountain states. In late summer, the wheat runs gold to the horizon in every direction, an ocean of a state, not a mountain. Fact 46. America's most famous defeat happened here. On the grass hills above the Little Bighorn River in southeastern Montana, the most famous battle of the Indian Wars was fought on the 25th of June, 1876. Lakota, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors annihilated Custer's battalion, roughly 210 men, in under an hour. News reached the East during the 4th of July centennial celebrations. America learned of its most shocking military defeat on its 100th birthday. White marble markers still stand exactly where each soldier fell. Fact 45. Bigger than Japan, Emptier, than San Francisco. 147,040 square miles. Montana is slightly larger than Japan. A nation of 125 million people, yet it holds barely over 1 million residents. Only Alaska and Wyoming are emptier, per second square mile, and parts of eastern Montana average fewer than 1 person, per second square mile, a density closer to Mongolia than to most of America. Crossing the state on I-90 takes about 9 hours, the same drive time as London to the Scottish Highlands. Fact 44. 3 provinces, 1 state. Every other border state touches at most 2 Canadian provinces. Montana touches 3, British Columbia, Alberta, and Saskatchewan, along roughly 545 miles of international line. At some prairie crossings, the border is nothing but a mowed strip of grass running to both horizons. That long frontage helped create the world's first international peace park when Glacier joined Canada's Waterton Lakes in 1932. Fact 43. The world's shortest river. Near Great Falls, the Roe River flows about 201 feet from Giant Springs into the Missouri, recognized by Guinness World Records as the shortest river on Earth. You can walk its entire length in under a minute. It earned its listing after a campaign by Great Falls schoolchildren, and it empties directly into the longest river system in North America. The continent's shortest and longest rivers touch. Fact 42. The spring that remembers 26 years of rain. Every day, about 156 million gallons of water rise out of the ground at Giant Springs, one of the largest freshwater springs in the country, and the source of that 201-foot river. The water fell as snow in the Little Belt Mountains, 60 miles away, then spent roughly 26 years underground before surfacing at a constant 54 degrees. Lewis and Clark documented it in 1805. The water welling up today fell around the year 2000. Fact 41. The longest river starts here, at Three Forks, in southwestern Montana, 3 clear mountain rivers. The Jefferson, the Madison, and the Gallatin braid together in open grassland. This quiet, wadeable confluence is the start of the Missouri, the longest river in North America at roughly 2,341 miles. A drop of Montana snowmelt travels farther than a coast-to-coast road trip before reaching the Gulf. In total, the state holds roughly 170,000 miles of river. Fact 40. The world's innermost port. Montana is the largest landlocked state in America. It also contains what has been called the world's innermost port. Fort Benton, founded in 1846 and the state's oldest continuously occupied settlement, sat at the head of steamboat navigation on the Missouri, more than 3,000 river miles from the sea. From 1860 to 1887, nearly all freight for the gold camps of the Northwest and even Western Canada crossed its mile-and-a-half levee, a seaport within sight of the Rocky Mountain front. Fact 39. The dam on the first life cover. 21,026 feet. Fort Peck Dam is nearly 4 miles long, 250 feet high, and holds over 125 million cubic yards of earth, enough fill to build the Great Pyramid of Giza, roughly 50 times over. It is the largest hydraulically filled dam in the United States, built by more than 10,000 New Deal workers between 1933 and 1940. Margaret Burke White photographed its spillway for the very first cover of Life magazine in November 1936. Fact 38. A lake longer than California's coast. The reservoir behind that dam runs 134 miles up the Missouri, flooding a maze of badlands coulees into thousands of fingers of water. The result is 1,520 miles of shoreline, roughly 700 miles more than the entire Pacific coast of California. Fort Peck Lake is the 5th largest reservoir in the country, and all of it sits inside the million-acre Charles M. Russell National Wildlife Refuge. From the air, it looks like blue lightning fracturing across brown prairie. Fact 37. More hooves than humans. An average square mile of Montana holds roughly 1.4 elk, 1.4 pronghorn, and 3.3 deer, against a statewide human density of about 7 people. The state hosts the nation's largest migratory elk herd and over 100 mammal species, and the Rocky Mountain front has recorded more golden eagles in a single day than anywhere else in the country. In much of eastern Montana, a random square mile is more likely to contain deer than people. Fact 36. Grizzly country. Outside Alaska, the American grizzly survives at scale in exactly one place. Montana holds roughly 2,000 grizzly bears, the largest population in the lower 48, centered on Glacier National Park and the Bob Marshall Wilderness. The bears are now expanding back east onto the prairie, reaching country they haven't occupied since the 1,800 seconds. Ranchers on the front now photograph grizzlies crossing wheat fields miles from the nearest mountain. Fact 35. The snowstorm made of birds. Each March, hundreds of thousands of snow geese and tundra swans descend on Freezout Lake along the Rocky Mountain front, pausing between wintering grounds as far south as Mexico and their Arctic nesting sites. On peak days, state biologists count up to 60,000 geese and 5,000 swans at once. Locals call the dawn liftoff a snowstorm of wings. The entire lake surface appears to detach and rise. Hundreds of people stand in the pre-dawn dark just to watch it. Fact 34. The glacier full of grasshoppers. High in the Beartooth Mountains sits Grasshopper Glacier, named because its ice entombed millions of grasshoppers, including swarms of the Rocky Mountain locust, a species extinct since the early 1900 seconds. Migrating swarms were caught in storms over the peaks, froze, and were sealed into the ice in layers. As the glacier melts back, it is releasing and destroying its frozen archive of a vanished species. Fact 33. A harder climb than almost any state, about 12,800 feet. Granite Peak, Montana's highest point, wasn't climbed until 1923, one of the last state high points ever summited, and it is widely considered the second most difficult in America, behind only Denali. Most state summits can be walked up. This one demands technical climbing, route finding, and luck with weather that produces snowstorms in July. It crowns the Beartooth Plateau, the largest continuous landmass above 10,000 feet in the continental United States. Fact 32. A highway above the clouds. Out of Red Lodge, the Beartooth Highway climbs more than 5,000 vertical feet in about 12 miles of switchbacks, topping out at 10,947 feet, the highest elevation highway in the Northern Rockies. Charles Curl called it the most beautiful roadway in America. It opens around Memorial Day and closes by mid-October, and a ski area near the top operates in June and July. Drivers leave Valley summer and reach snowball season in about 40 minutes. Fact 31. A 187-degree state, 187 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the span between Montana's all-time high of 117 at Medicine Lake and its all-time low of 70 below at Rogers Pass, the widest temperature range recorded in any state. Arctic air spilling from Canada meets continental summer heat here, with no ocean nearby to moderate either extreme. The hottest and coldest recorded places in the state sit about 500 road miles apart. 1 day's drive. Fact 30. The cold capital of the lower 48. West Yellowstone, sitting at about 6,600 feet in a cold air basin beside the park, is reported to be the most consistent daily cold spot in the continental United States. The town most often posting the nation's lowest reading. High elevation, pooling dense air, clear mountain nights. On 40 below mornings, the town runs anyway. Exhaust plumes standing straight up in air too still to move. Fact 29. The coldest place in America. The coldest temperature ever officially recorded in the contiguous United States belongs to Montana. On the 20th of January 1954, at a mining camp near Rogers Pass on the Continental Divide, a National Weather Service cooperative observer read 70 degrees below zero, colder than an average winter at the North Pole, and only 10 degrees off Alaska's all-time record. A week of snowfall had just ended, skies cleared at sunset, and the fresh snowpack radiated its heat into space. More than 70 years on, no station in the lower 48 has beaten it. Fact 28. More weather whiplash records. 47 degrees in 7 minutes. That is the reported temperature rise in Great Falls on the 11th of January, 1980. Minus 32 to plus 15. Faster than most elevator rides. Fairfield holds the mirror image, a reported 84-degree fall in 12 hours in December 1924. Both records come from Chinook winds, arriving or dying along the Rocky Mountain front. Residents describe hearing the warm wind roaring in the treetops moments before feeling it. Fact 27. The 103-degree day. The town of Loma holds the world record for temperature change in 24 hours. Between the 14th of January and 1972, the air warmed from 54 below zero to 49 above, a 103-degree swing in a single rotation of the Earth. The driver was a Chinook, plunging down the east slope of the Rockies. Snowbanks slumped in real time, and windows fogged as sub-zero glass met spring-like air. Deadly Arctic cold to a mild afternoon one day. Fact 26. Dinner plate snowflakes. When people picture record snow, they picture depth. Montana's snow record is about size. At Fort Keogh near Miles City, on the 28th of January 1887, a rancher reported snowflakes 15 inches across, described as larger than milk pans, falling over an area of several miles. Guinness still lists it as the largest snowflake ever recorded. The physics is real. Near freezing, windless air lets thousands of crystals clump together mid-fall. Plates of snow drifting down in silence. Which of these facts has surprised you most so far? Drop it in the comments. We read every one. And stay with us, because the heaviest entries are still ahead. The pit that kills birds, the night a mountain fell, and the largest flood ever documented on Earth. Fact 25. The gold rush city of 50 millionaires. Helena, the state capital, was born as a gold camp in 1864 when 4 prospectors made a last-chance strike in the gulch that is now its main street. By 1888, the small city reportedly held about 50 millionaires. By some accounts, more per capita than anywhere else in the world. The gulch beneath it produced gold worth an estimated $3.6 billion in today's dollars. As late as the 1972nd, repair crews found a vein of placer gold under a bank's foundation. Fact 24. America's Sapphire Vault. Nearly every fine sapphire sold today has been heat-treated to improve its color. The exception comes from one narrow gulch in central Montana. Yogo sapphires emerge naturally, cornflower blue, needing no treatment at all, and they occur nowhere else on Earth in a single igneous dike only a few feet wide. An estimated 28 million carats remain in the ground. Specimens sit in the Smithsonian's National Gem Collection, and early stones went into Tiffany jewelry. Fact 23. A city a mile high and a mile deep. Butte calls itself a mile high and a mile deep, and it means it literally, beneath the city, run roughly 10,000 miles of abandoned mine tunnels, enough to cross the United States twice, served by 49 miles of vertical shafts, some dropping more than a mile. At least 512 mines honeycomb the hill, producing over 20 billion pounds of copper and, by the EPA's accounting, more than 1 trillion pounds of metals overall. Mules lowered underground lived their entire lives there. Black steel head frames still tower over the neighborhoods, marking shafts beneath people's homes. Fact 22. One hill, a quarter of the world's copper, 210 million pounds a year. By 1896, a roughly 5-square-mile patch of Butte was producing over a quarter of the world's copper supply and more than half of America's at the exact moment the planet was wiring itself for electricity. The richest hill on Earth made Butte one of the largest cities between Chicago and the West Coast and made its copper kings among the wealthiest men alive. The Treasure State earned its nickname on this one hill. Fact 21. America's worst hard rock mining disaster. That wealth carried a price. In June 1917, a fire deep in the Granite Mountain and speculator workings ignited when a lamp touched an insulated cable, filled the interconnected tunnels with smoke and gas, killing 167 miners. It remains the deadliest hard rock mining disaster in American history. Some men survived for days behind hand-built bulkheads. Their farewell notes survive today. In total, over 2,300 men died on the Butte Hill. Fact 20. The first woman in Congress, before women could vote, the 7th of November, 1916. 4 years before the 19th Amendment, Montana elected Jeanette Rankin to the U.S. House, the first woman in American history to win a seat in Congress. She had helped Montana women win the vote in 1914, then used that momentum to make national history. A lifelong pacifist, She remains the only member of Congress to vote against American entry into both world wars. The second vote was hers alone, 388 to 1. Fact 19. The reading and drinking champion. For a state of 1 million people, Montana reads and brews far above its weight. It has ranked first in the nation for bookstores per capita, roughly one for every 15,700 residents, and top 3 in craft breweries per capita for over a decade, running on homegrown grain from the country's number 2 barley state. In many small towns, the bookstore and the tap room share the same frontier-era block. Fact 18. Where firefighters fall from the sky. Missoula is home to the largest smoke jumper base in the United States, headquarters of the firefighters who parachute into remote wildfire. The Forest Service's first operational jumps came in 1940, and Montana's vast, roadless forests made the state the birthplace of aerial firefighting. Each jumper still packs and sews their own gear in a rigging loft that has operated for more than 80 years. Fact 17. 3,000 acres in 10 minutes. On the 5th of August, 1949, a fire in Man Gulch, above the Missouri's Gates of the Mountains, blew up, consuming roughly 3,000 acres in about 10 minutes, faster than the young smoke jumpers on the slope could run uphill. 12 of them and one fire guard died within about 300 yards of one another. Foreman Wag Dodge survived by inventing the escape fire on the spot, burning a patch of grass and lying in its ashes as the flames roared around him. Before that day, no smoke jumper had ever died on a fire. 13 stone markers stand in the gulch where each man fell. Fact 16. The manhunt that ended in a Montana cabin. Near the small town of Lincoln, one of the longest and most expensive manhunts in FBI history ended on the 3rd of April, 1996. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, whose devices had killed 3 people and injured 23 over 17 years, had lived unnoticed for about a quarter century in a one-room off-grid cabin with a single dirty window. Inside, agents found a live bomb ready for mailing and roughly 40,000 handwritten pages. The cabin now sits reconstructed at FBI headquarters. Fact 15. The state with no speed limit. The 8th of December, 1995 to May 28, 1999. For those 3.5 years, Montana had no numerical daytime speed limit. The last state in America where the only rule was to drive at a reasonable and prudent speed. Troopers worked from an unofficial threshold of around 80 to 90 miles per hour, and enthusiasts flew in just to run their cars flat out on what became known as the Montana Bond. The state Supreme Court finally struck the law down as unconstitutionally vague. A 75 limit followed. Fact 14. The only physical trace of Lewis and Clark. The Lewis and Clark expedition covered roughly 8,800 miles. Along that entire trail, exactly one piece of on-site physical evidence survives, and it is in Montana. On the 25th of July, 1806, William Clark carved his name and the date into Pompey's Pillar, a 150-foot sandstone outcrop above the Yellowstone River, beside native petroglyphs on a rock. The Crow knew as the place where the mountain lion lies. The signature is still there, behind glass, one name. That's it. Fact 13. The only Army survivor was a horse. When relief columns reached the Little Bighorn battlefield, the only living thing they recovered from Custer's annihilated battalion was a badly wounded horse named Comanche. The victors had captured 80 to 90 other mounts. Comanche alone was found and saved. Retired with honors and never ridden again, he appeared saddled and riderless in 7th Cavalry parades until his death in 1891. Of more than 200 men and their animals, the Army's sole battlefield survivor stood on 4 legs. Fact 12. Dinosaur parenting was discovered here. At Egg Mountain near Choteau in 1978, scientists found North America's first baby dinosaur bones. whole nesting colonies with eggshells, hatchlings, and adults preserved together. The species was named Myasara, good mother lizard, because the site proved something textbooks had long denied. Some dinosaurs fed and guarded their young instead of laying eggs and leaving. The fossil nests are bowl-shaped depressions, packed with crushed shell, trampled by hatchlings that stayed home. Fact 11. The dinosaur mummy. In 2001, near the town of Malta, diggers uncovered a duck-billed dinosaur with most of its body still covered in fossilized skin. Leonardo, a Brachylophosaurus, is recognized by Guinness World Records as the best-preserved dinosaur ever found. Less a skeleton than a 77-million-year-old mummy, complete enough for scientists to study its skin texture and stomach contents. A town of about 2,000 people keeps a world-class dinosaur. Fact 10. Where T-Rex was born to science. Before 1902, humanity had no idea Tyrannosaurus rex existed. Then, fossil hunter Barnum Brown pulled a skeleton out of the Hell Creek Badlands near Jordan, Montana, the first T-Rex known to science, formally named in 1905. More than 95% of T-Rex museum specimens come from the Hell Creek Formation, which preserves the final chapter of the dinosaur age right up to the asteroid impact 66 million years ago. Nearly every T-Rex you have ever seen in a museum traces back to this one stretch of eastern Montana. Fact 9. The nation's T-Rex is a Montanan. Near Fort Peck Reservoir in 1988, rancher Kathy Wankel spotted arm bones sticking out of the ground on a family outing. They belong to one of the most complete T-Rex skeletons ever found, roughly 80 to 85%, close to 200 bones. After 2 decades at Bozeman's Museum of the Rockies, home to the world's largest T-Rex and Triceratops collection, the 7-ton fossil crossed the country in 16 crates. It now anchors the Smithsonian's Fossil Hall as the nation's T-Rex posed devouring a Triceratops. Fact 8. The boulders that ring like bells. Strike an ordinary-looking boulder 18 miles east of Butte with a hammer and it rings like a bell. And the ringing rocks, part of the 1.2 million-acre boulder, batholith, form one of only 2 known chiming boulder fields in the United States, and scientists still cannot fully explain the mechanism. Remove a boulder from the pile, and it falls silent. Different rocks produce different pitches. Train whistles, church bells, gongs. Bring your own hammer. Fact 7. A park losing its namesake. 1-5-0-26. At the end of the Little Ice Age, around 1850, the land that became Glacier National Park held roughly 150 glaciers. By 2015, the USGS counted 26, still large enough to qualify. Average glacier area shrank 39% between 1966 and 2015. Boulder Glacier alone lost 85%. The agency's repeat photography project pairs century-old images with modern shots from the same spots. Walls of ice replaced by bare rock and meltwater. The park is outliving its own name. Fact 6. One peak, 3 oceans. On Triple Divide Peak in Glacier National Park, raindrops landing inches apart end up in different oceans. One side drains to the Missouri, the Mississippi, and the Gulf. Another rides the Columbia to the Pacific. The third runs north through the Saskatchewan system into Hudson Bay, which the International Hydrographic Organization classes as Arctic waters. 1802, Offutt's summit feeds 3 of the continent's great watersheds, the only hydrological apex of its kind in the United States, a modest pyramid of rock deciding the fate of every drop that lands on it. Fact 5. The lake that dissolves metal. Butte's most famous landmark is not a building. It is a hole. The Berkeley Pit, a mile long, half a mile wide, about 1,780 feet deep, is a former copper mine now flooded with more than 40 billion gallons of acidic, metal-laden water. When the pump shut down in 1982, groundwater refilled the pit through those 10,000 miles of old workings, leaching copper, arsenic, cadmium, zinc, and sulfuric acid out of the rock. The water is rust red from dissolved iron, deep enough to submerge the Eiffel Tower, and lethal enough to kill waterfowl within hours. It has been a Superfund site since 1987. Fact 4. Tens of thousands of geese over a toxic lake. On the night of the 28th of November, 2016, residents of Butte heard tens of thousands of snow geese circling in the dark. A snowstorm had forced a delayed migration out of the sky. Their usual stopover lake was frozen, and the only open water for miles was the Berkeley pit. Witnesses described 700 acres of white birds on the red water. Mine staff worked through the night with noise and lights, but an estimated 3,000 geese died, against the 2,000 to 5,000 migrating birds Butte normally sees in an entire year. Today, lasers, drones, and sound cannons guard the pit around the clock. Fact 3. The night a mountain fell. 11:37 p.m., the 17th of August, 1959. A magnitude 7.3 earthquake, the strongest ever recorded in the Rocky Mountain region of the lower 48, struck just outside Yellowstone. In under minutes, some 80 million tons of mountainside collapsed into Montana's Madison River Canyon at over 100 miles per hour, burying a full campground, running 450 feet up the far canyon wall and damming the river. 28 people died, 19 were never recovered. Behind the rubble, the blocked river rose into Quake Lake, roughly 190 feet deep, within 3 weeks. Dead trees still stand in its water. Fact 2. A city with bathtub rings. Look up from downtown Missoula, and the hillsides are striped with faint horizontal lines. They are shorelines, the stacked waterlines of Glacial Lake, Missoula, an Ice Age lake that put nearly 2,000 feet of water over the site of today's city. Each line marks a pause between the lake's fillings and its catastrophic drainings. A university town at the bottom of a vanished lake, with the rings on its mountains to prove it. Fact 1. The largest floods in Earth's known history. And here is where that lake went. During the last ice age, a lobe of glacial ice dammed the Clark Fork River and ponded a 200-mile lake over western Montana, holding more water than Lake Erie and Lake Ontario combined. When the water floated and shattered its ice dam, roughly 500 cubic miles drained in about 2 days, at a peak discharge estimated near 17 million cubic meters per second, around 10 times the flow of every river on Earth combined. It happened dozens of times over thousands of years, carving eastern Washington's scablands and the Columbia River Gorge. The largest floods ever documented on this planet began in Montana, a state larger than Japan, holding 1 million people, and as it turns out, holding world records in cold, copper, dinosaurs, and catastrophe. My favorite is fact 42. A spring quietly delivering snow that fell 26 years ago at 156 million gallons a day into the world's shortest river. The whole state's patience and scale compressed into one city park. Which facts surprised you most? Tell us in the comments. And if geography and natural science are your thing, subscribe. There's a new countdown every week.